really excited to talk about this one. I was thinking about it on my run when I was in the meadows with the horse. It's going to be a good one.
I'm curious your thoughts on the realisticness of the story. Not that you'll know all of it, but I feel like you'll be able to speak to some of it more than I can.
Oh. I mean, I could get into it right now if you want.
Before we do that, let's introduce... Yeah.
Let me take it. I'm Zoe, and this is Jackie, and this is Aftermash Podcast, where we typically discuss some farce we were taught as a child, a la the mash board, as two 30-something-year-olds. But today we are doing a book club where we are discussing Claro Burke's debut novel, Yesteryear.
Yeah, let's get into it. Zoe and I both listened to the podcast that the author co-hosts, and that was part of the inspiration for us to start this podcast. We think that they do a phenomenal job, and it's been very inspiring, and so we were really excited to hear that her book was coming out, and we both pre-ordered it, and we were texting each other as we were reading it.
And we went to book events.
Yeah, we both went to individual book events to watch this author present her book, and so I left that book event being like, oh my god, I'm so jazzed up to read this book. And then I read it, and then I just kept texting Zoe as I was reading, being like, actually, I'm not going to spoil what I was texting her about, but, yeah.
What's your top line? What's your top line of the book? Your top line takeaway.
My top line takeaway is this book was not what I expected it to be, and I'm just going to come out with it. I don't feel like it delivered what I wanted it to. I wanted it to be a critique of our modern existence and influencer culture and capitalism and patriarchy, and like it set itself up as though it was going to be that, and then I feel like it completely dropped the bag. Yeah, I'm gonna end there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the book was fine. I think because I know who Claire Burke is as a thinker, I was able to fill in a lot of what she was trying to do, but the story itself was not enough.
Okay, this is interesting because I was really thinking that Zoe was going to walk away being like, that was great, and we were going to have a lively debate. I still think we're going to have a lively debate, but it's interesting to hear you mostly aligning with me, considering how many rave reviews this book has gotten.
So, let's say this. We both came out, we're like not impressed by it. And I don't think society is used to critiques. And I want to say I have so much regard for Claro Burke. I think she is so intelligent, so articulate, so passionate. I think she is all those things more than I could ever hope to be. I am happy for her. She spent 10 years trying to write a book and get it published. And not only did she do that, but it landed in the hands of Anne Hathaway. So it's not like I'm not jealous, right? But as we said, this book falls flat. And to your question about like real life of it, I think that's one of the most disappointing things, is because, and if it's not clear, there's going to be spoilers in this conversation.
I was going to say that next. Yeah. If you haven't read the book and you intend to read it, come back to this episode at the end. If you aren't going to read the book, or if you have already read it and you want it to be spoiled, then keep listening.
Okay, and so for those who haven't read it and are just curious, because I do that too, I'm like, okay, yeah. I don't care to read this book, you did it for me. It follows a tradwife Instagram influencer who faces horrible allegations and has a complete psychotic break and like becomes a complete recluse, essentially.
Yeah, the way the story is pitched to us is there's a wildly successful influencer who sells herself as being on a farm and, you know, being very tradwife, but actually they secretly have, you know, an army of workers behind the scenes, and her in-laws are rich, and so that's how they can afford to do this. And then she wakes up one day in the 1850s on an actual farm, and she goes, what the fuck happened? And so I was thinking the story was going to be about her realizing how much harder being on a farm was compared to what she was pretending to do. But yeah, that is not what happened.
That's also what I expected, and we'll get into it. But to answer your point about like the real life of it, I do think that like that is a good. It does highlight reality. Like what we see on Instagram is not what's real, and like all of our Instagram influencers, like the fitness ones, they're on steroids. They're getting nipped and tucked. Like they don't actually look like that, right? But what's most disappointing about it to me is like this was very clearly Ballerina Farm devolves into Ruby Frankie. And
I know our listeners probably know these things, but can you give us the like 10-second summary of who Ballerina Farm and who?
Yeah. I don't follow any of these people, but Ballerina Farm is like the classic thought of the tradwife. She has like 8 kids and she makes butter from scratch every morning and she's exhausted and run ragged. But in reality, her husband is the heir of some airline. And so they are loaded. And then Ruby Frankie, she had a YouTube channel, like 8 passengers or something like that, and she got called out for keeping her youngest 2 children hostage and has been, I don't know if she's been convicted of serious child abuse, but I think she's in jail now with Elizabeth Holmes. And recently Ruby Frankie's daughter wrote a memoir. And so as a creative writer, I want there to be more creativity and less inspiration from these things, because I feel like she completely co-opted these stories and they were not hers to tell.
Yeah. So before we get into it, I feel like we should kind of summarize the story for our listeners. I mean, we told you what it was premised as, but the way the story actually unfolds, we start with the main character. Her name is Natalie. She is going to college at Harvard. And she's maybe the first one in her family to go to college, or at least she's the first one to go to college away from her little highly religious family. Do you remember what state they were in?
They're in Idaho because it's not said, but it's heavily implied that they're Mormon.
Yeah, but to your point, we never clarify what the religion is. So she's raised on a family that is nominally Mormon type. She goes to Harvard expecting to have intellectual challenge and having really good conversation. She winds up finding herself surrounded by people who are hooking up with each other and having a popularity contest. People comment about her long hair that's in a braid and her prairie dresses. She winds up feeling completely unsatisfied by it and retreats from society, meets a man at a church group named Caleb, who is really cute and comes from, like Zoe said, a rich family, but is otherwise pretty dumb. They get married really fast. She has her first kid by the time she's 20.
Doesn't finish college.
She gets really bad postpartum depression, doesn't really know what to do with it. She gets to know his family and realizes that his mom is doing a lot of uppers to control her mood. His dad is this really power-hungry politician. She realizes that the man she married is actually like a man-child who just likes watching porn and playing video games and reading Reddit threads. And she feels very lost and hopeless. And then she comes up with the idea of, what if we move to a farm? And so she convinces her in-laws to buy them a farm. They move out there. At first, they're just doing farm things, and her husband is a complete idiot. And then eventually she starts posting about it on the internet, and then she gets inspired to try and go viral. She manages to go viral. Then she becomes the Ballerina Farm type farm, where she's making all this content all the time about what it's like to be a traditional wife, but they actually have this like horde of Mexican immigrants who are working the fields. It's not actually organic, even though they claim to be. This all comes to a head when her husband sleeps with the producer and gets convinced that he's in love with the producer. And our main character, Natalie, who signed a really aggressive prenup and felt very stuck and felt very much like she had to be doing this in order to maintain her family and to like be a good Christian. She's like, we can't have that. We need to make it go away. So, and
also to have any control of this life that she's absolutely trapped in, because she hates her husband. She doesn't like her kids. She's a horrible mom. She needs validation somehow, and this is the only way she can get it.
Yeah, it winds up escalating to the point where she assaults the producer. She convinces her husband to run for office instead of running away with the producer. This winds up blowing up when the producer then turns around and goes to the press and says, hey, I was assaulted by this really famous person that I used to work for. And this all culminates in our main character having a psychotic break. And so the story is told in flashbacks between the story we just told and then her having woken up in the 1850s. And she's waken up in a family where they're very isolated. There are children, but they're not the children that she remembered. There's her husband, but he's like, he looks older and meaner. And like, he's a lot gruffer and more competent than the Caleb that she remembered. And she spends the whole time that she's on this farm, like freaking out about being on the farm and feeling like she needs to leave. And then she's like, maybe this is actually God sending me a message. And then she's like, I don't know, maybe this is like a twisted reality show. She like goes through all of these crazy ideas in her head. She tries to run away a couple of times and she keeps getting brought back. They're on a farm in the 1850s, but she's actually not doing any chores. She kind of just like sits in the corner moping or like plotting her escape. And her teenage daughter is like running the household and kind of mad at her. And so as the reader, you're kind of confused about what's happening and like why they have this weird relationship with her, why she's trying to run away, why they keep bringing her back. There are these little tells about like she finds a piece of plastic. And so then you realize like maybe she's not in the 1850s. Maybe there's something else going on. But it's not until the end of the story that we finally realize what's happening. And Zoe, do you want to tell that part?
You're doing such a good job.
Okay, fine. I'll keep going. So we get to the end of the story and we find out that she isn't in the 1850s. She's actually in the present day still. And what had happened was after the producer had gone to the press about how she'd been assaulted and all of these allegations came out, our main character, Natalie, felt so bad that she had a psychotic break and she convinced her husband and everybody else that they should renovate their house as though it was the 1850s, completely withdraw from society, live off the grid, live off the land, and continue raising their kids this way and telling them that it is the 1850s.
And it's not that she felt bad as in she felt remorse. She felt caught in her lies and didn't know what to do about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so she fully retreated. And so what we're seeing now when she wakes up in the 1850s and freaks out is she has had a deterioration of her mental state. And she has been going in and out of psychosis since then. And so this is her waking up kind of in a psychosis where she has forgotten the last 10 years of her life, where she's been living on this like fake 1850s farm. And
had 5 new, like completely new children. And the other children, like the first batch of children were taken away by CPS or something.
Yeah, but not the second batch. Let me just talk about how it ends and then you can ask me the question. Yeah. So anyhow, she wakes up, we find out that this has all been an extended psychotic break, and then it ends with her daughter, who had been a teenager at the point of the original psychotic break, is now coming back. She's a 30-something-year-old, and she finally has documents that let her get custody of her remaining siblings, and so she takes them away, and our main character goes to jail.
How do you feel about the like back and forth, the parallel storylines?
I feel like when done well, it can be really intriguing. I also think since so much of the story did happen in the time before the 1850s, it makes sense to give us a lot of that. I think the one thing that I was really struck by is like, as listeners can probably tell from how we told the story, like the bulk of the story was the flashback and only very little of it takes place in the 1850s or in the quote 1850s. So I felt like we had really long chapters of flashback followed by relatively short chapters of her being like, oh my God, what's happening? Why are my bed sheets all scratchy? What about you?
I don't hate a back and forth on premise. I like when it's done well. I think what's interesting about how this story played out is in the beginning of the book, before we knew the twist, and we don't know the twist until like the last 50 pages, if that. I was thinking like, this lady's having a psychotic break, and this is the 1850s before they have the language for that, and what is her family thinking?
Mm-hmm.
And then it came to fruition that she was having a psychotic break. And I think it was interesting because, like, towards the end, you kind of got confused as to which timeline you were. So I think that was, like, done well as well. However, I think this story would have been better if it was just a straight timeline. I think it would have captured the downfall and the, like, spiral into psychosis a lot better. And in my book event, Caro said that she didn't want the, like, internet of it all and, like, the internet comments in it to, like, take too much attention away. However, I think that could have been a really good tool in documenting the psychosis as well. And it was an interesting choice in that, like, this is supposed to be a commentary on influencers, and, like, half of an influencer's life is engaging with the online fans.
Yeah, I think to your point, because we're confused for so much of the story about what's happening, we don't really, like, the weight of it doesn't hit until the very end, and then suddenly the, like, emotional reveal is, like, so rushed, whereas if it had been told more linearly, we would have, like, felt it more acutely. But I think the reason she wrote the story this way is because it's meant to have the shtick of, like, she wakes up in the 1850s, and I think if we realize that she's not in the 1850s, we wouldn't be reading the book. Like, I think the only reason people are reading it is because it has that hook.
I guess, like, it's such a blatant lie then. Like, the premise is just wrong, and that's why I don't like it like that.
Yeah. Well, and she did an episode of the podcast that she and her co-host run called Diabolical Lies, where she explains that she only ever wanted it to be a psychotic break. Like, she thought about all the different reasons why she could be waking up at the 1850s, and that was the only reason that she considered. And so that's the other thing that really struck me is, like, this author never wanted it to be her actually waking up in the 1850s. It wasn't actually meant to be about her grappling with how hard it is to live in the 1850s. It was always meant to be just a psychotic break of someone who goes crazy from the influencing fame.
And that could have been a totally fine storyline. They didn't have to, like, literally wake up in the 1850s. And if you know that that's the twist, why are you selling it to us like that? I think that's what's most confusing to me about this and making me a little more angry right now.
Yeah. I mean, that's what gets it to sell. Like, would you just
Anne
read it?
Hathaway bought it. Like, that's enough.
But would you have been so eager to read it if it had just been a story of an influencer goes crazy?
From Caro Claire Burke, I would have.
I don't think as many people would have. I think that's how she sold it.
That's fair. Yeah, I guess, like, it's just all a gimmick. Like, the way she sold it, being in the 1850s, is just making me so mad right now. And, like, the entire tradwife thing is just very gimmicky for 2026.
I think the thing that bothered me about that is the story that we were sold is, like, there's an influencer who's getting away with something, but she's doing it because she, like, loves the fame or whatever, and she's, like, lying to people. And then she wakes up in a situation where she realizes that the lie she was selling is actually unpalatable. And I think that is a really interesting story. But what we learn is this main character, Natalie, never really likes being an influencer. It's just her way of trying to maintain control of a situation that feels very out of her control. And then when she wakes up in the 1850s, she actually doesn't hate it. She winds up towards the end being like, actually, this is really peaceful and I love it. And I, like, feel closer to God because I'm living a simpler life and this is so much better than the fame that I had before. And so I think we were reading it kind of looking for a reckoning of, like, this person who is pretending to be something she's not, like, coming to terms with the fact that she can't get away with lying to people. And instead we just see her being kind of crazy and then also kind of liking the alternative. And
not really learning anything, I guess.
Yeah, that's the other thing that Caro said in the interview, where she was like, I know that this character will not grow and change, so, like, she will stay crazy the whole time. And I think that makes it an unsatisfying story for us to listen to. So I have a lot of things that I could complain about, but I would love to hear if there are things about the story that you appreciated or enjoyed or thought were, like, well told.
I mean, like I said, I think the way that, like, in the beginning we're questioning, like, what is this family thinking? Like, this lady is clearly psychotic. I think that subtlety was foresight. And then I think towards the end, once we're coming up to the twist and we're kind of confused, or at least I was confused as to what storyline we're in, like, that was well done. But other than that, like I said, I wish it was just a straightforward timeline. I think the writing was very accessible, and if that sounds like an insult, maybe it is, because I feel like that's how I would have written a book, and I could have written a book, and I don't have an MFA, and I haven't spent 10 years doing it.
Wow, this turned from, like, not being that much of a burn to, like, that was a pretty deep burn.
I know, and I feel really bad. Like I said, I hold her in high regard, and it's like, the story is compelling enough. right? Like, I don't want to dissuade anyone from reading it. It's, like, compelling enough. It's an easy read. It's quick. But, like, it's not what we were promised. And I feel like because I knew what Caro was saying, like, who Caro is as a thinker, like, I knew what she was trying to say. So I think I just, like, naturally filled in the blanks.
That's interesting.
So I guess I don't have that many good things to say because I just recapped everything I've already said.
Yeah, I don't think people should read this book, and I can go into my reasons why. And I do want to echo what you're saying, which is like, I think she's a phenomenal thinker. I think some of her podcast episodes have felt like master's theses. Like I walk away every time being like, wow, she blew my mind. So I was expecting something like that from this. And so the fact that we're not in no way takes away from what I believe is her literary prowess. It's really just that I don't think this was it. I think that she wrote a book for the masses that had this really catchy hook, and it didn't deliver to the degree that she is capable of. But yeah, I mean, I really don't think it delivered. I think there's a lot of different reasons. I wrote them all down.
First being that she wrote it in 4 months. And it sounds like she was pretty unwilling to explore different routes.
Yeah. I mean, I think let's just start from there. Like, the ending of this story is the main character devolving into a psychotic break and then going to jail. And the main character is the woman who, you know, she's a victim of her own making, but also she's a victim of the society that we thought this book was going to be criticizing. She doesn't finish college. She comes from a small town where there aren't a lot of opportunities. She was raised in a really strict religious household where she was told very narrow ways that she can be a successful woman and a successful adult. And she's like living those by the letter of the law.
But also, she's the only one who has a single mother. Like, why have that if, like, it's not actually useful in the story at all? And it's also how I feel where she's, like, suddenly accused of being lesbian. It's like, we don't need that. She's strangling her. Like, that's bad enough.
Yeah, that was very random. But yeah, we have this woman who is coming from a very repressive situation. She finds herself married to a rich person and, like, having children with him, but then she signed a really aggressive prenup and she can't get out of that relationship without losing everything. And then to your point, there are these like telling background characters like her single mom and like her roommate and her sister who winds up getting a divorce. And like those could be cautionary tales for us, seeing why she would be so stuck in that situation and why she would be feeling so much pressure. And instead, all the cautionary tales wind up being fine. Like her sister gets a divorce and has like 5 kids and somehow just like goes on to meet the love of her life and has a great time. And it's like, actually, I thought the point of the story was that like Natalie, the main character, does this because she has to. And like, obviously she also wants power, but she's partially doing it because she has to. And so I wish that there had been a foil of these other characters showing like, yeah, actually life would have been hard if she hadn't done this. Like that would have made her a much more complex character. And then the fact that it ends with her psychosis and she is the only person who is seen going to jail for her horrible treatment of the children when like her family sees that she has this extended psychotic break. Her in-laws have been keeping the child protective services off their back for 10 years so that they could raise them in this awful way. Her husband is supposedly never having a psychotic break and is still going along with this. Like there are a lot of other able-bodied adults in this situation who are enabling her descending into madness. And so I think the way that the story is told really undermines the power that it could have had for us to feel bad for her and to like empathize with the fact that her life would have been hard and she was making the best choices that she could.
Yeah, it's just lazy. It's lazy storytelling.
Yeah, she is the victim and it's all her fault because she was so egotistical. And so I think because of that, we don't walk away with any of the moral stories that I would have wanted us to walk away with.
All right, what's your next point? Jackie is much better at the like literary critiquing than I am, so it's her show now.
I was channeling my sister who has a bachelor's in English, and I'm trying to think of like, what would she be saying right now? I think that there was a lot about the story that felt very unbelievable. There were a lot of very specific things that happened to set up the next thing that happened that didn't feel real. I think the most obvious example is our main character, her in-laws are rich and powerful enough to make Natalie sign a really restrictive prenup when she got married, but not rich and powerful enough that when they bought off the producer who had been assaulted, they didn't make the producer sign an NDA. Like, that producer should never have been able to go to the press. Like, the fact that she was able to do that just, like, is completely unbelievable. People in power would not have let her do that. They wouldn't have just, like, paid her off and been like, she'll be fine. She won't rat on us. So, like, that's just one example, but I think there's a lot of stuff like that where as I was reading it, I was just like, but that's not how that would go. Can you give me more?
Because I, like, wasn't even thinking about that. What's another example?
Okay, yeah. I mean, another one is the in-laws are set up to be this sort of MAGA couple where they're really concerned about cities being infested with all these rats. And so he's set up as a very MAGA character, but they live in California. Like, they would live in Texas. They wouldn't be in California.
That's why I thought he was Joe Biden. Like,
I know. It's just like, that was very confusing to me.
Or George Bush. Like, one or the other.
Yeah.
Trump was not on my radar. Neither was RFK.
Yeah, but, like, their policies were very much of the, like, alt-right variety, the, like, super online. They call it the manosphere. Like, that is such a super online alt-right group.
Yeah, they don't normally shout that stuff out. The campaign messaging was a little confused, because a part of it was, like, very, like, quintessential, but other parts of it were too breaking the fourth wall in a way.
Yeah, I didn't feel like it was necessary to make him so blatantly, like...
Yeah, it's kind of implied because he has old money, you know?
Yeah, he could have just been a normal Republican. We didn't need to make him a Looney Tune.
Not him. Like, his son, for sure, but he should have been, a little more...
Especially if he lives in California. He would just be old money Republican, like, stop taxing us. It wouldn't be, like, crazy nonsense. Okay, the other one is the whole premise of the 1850s is that they have 10 years where the family is just, like, in this psychotic break where they're just, like, living off the land in the same exact house that they had when they were super famous. And Child Protective Services never investigates, despite the fact that the previous children have been taken away from her. They, like, ran away from home when they were kids and now live with grandma. And so, like, there's clearly a lot of awareness that situation devolved. And this is all done because the in-laws were really rich and didn't want it to ruin their campaign. So they, like, spent a lot of money to pay off Child Protective Services. And I just don't think that they would do that. I think the in-laws would just, like, disinherit the family and move on from it. Like, them spending themselves into poverty to keep this crazy family living on the farm that has the same address that it did when it was really famous, just, like, off of the radar of all of the police and Child Protective Services for a decade. Like, that just makes no sense. There's no amount of filial loyalty for somebody who is that power hungry that would have led them to do that, and it would not have been successful even if they had.
You have a lot of faith in the government, huh?
I just, like, for something that's that high profile, why would they let them get away with it? Like, they didn't even move. They are in the same house they were in when they were famous.
But it looks different now.
Only on the inside, not even on the outside. And then, like, even before that, the first set of children, before the psychotic break, there's a scene where the 11-year-old is talking to the producer, and the producer is like, oh, do you know about the ocean? And the 11-year-old is like, no, I've never, what is an ocean?
So, okay, maybe not the ocean, but did you read the book Educated?
I was thinking of that book, yeah.
Yeah, and she didn't know what the Holocaust was. So, like, it could have been...
I think those are pretty different.
They are pretty different, but it's, like, along the same lines. Like, Caro could have found something historical, like 9/11 or something. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But that's my point is, like, this is a very well-known family. They were famous in a bunch of different ways, and the children were getting an education that was so bad that this child didn't even understand what a giant body of water was. Like, they'd never seen a globe before, and that just felt completely unrealistic. To your point, the thing that she shouldn't have heard about is, like, it should have been, like, a historical event. It shouldn't have been, like, you know, the globe.
Yeah.
So, like, you can homeschool your kids. I don't think you can get away with homeschooling them that poorly if you're this famous. Maybe you can. Yeah. Maybe I have too much faith, but I would like to think that that's not possible. Okay, should I keep going? Like,
yeah, what's your next critique?
Let me look at my list.
I have, like, one other thing I want to get into, but I'm sure it'll come up, and if it doesn't, then I'll say it at the end.
Another little one is they have 2 nannies, but of all of the production staff, they only had 1 producer. They had no film crew. I thought it was interesting that they put all of their eggs in the one basket of this like 20-year-old college dropout who made
was
good
privileged
content.
in her own right.
Yeah. Also, they made the producer rich, which felt unnecessary. Like, this came up at the very end when she was, doing her tell-all TV campaign, and they're like, yeah, we found out that she comes from money. I'm like, why did we need that?
I think it's just to highlight, like, why can this person drop out of college and make no money in the middle of Idaho?
Yeah. But yeah, it just seems like they have a lot of details that did not connect back to the central plot in my mind.
Yeah.
I was very frustrated by the fact that when they were in the 1850s, we never see any 1850s. We never,
Because it doesn't exist.
The husband does all the farm chores, in theory, maybe with the two sons, and then the daughter does all of the house chores, and then the mom just, like, sometimes does laundry and complains that her hands get cracked, but... Like, I read Little House on the Prairie. Like, I know what this takes. Like, give me some more realism. Like, I understand that we wind up learning that that's not what it's like, but I still think that there could have been more details about, like, here's how we cooked the food. Here's how we started the fire in the fireplace. Or, like, literally anything. Give me something that makes me actually understand what's happening.
Yeah, this is where I'll say my next point. So, Caleb, the husband, is meant to be the lazy, dumb son. And he's, like, doesn't get along with any of his older siblings. They're left out of everything, him and Natalie. And that's basically all we're supposed to take away from it. And I found the idea of him not actually working the farm, but like sitting in a shack, a cabin, and watching football and having his sons give him some produce from the grocery store. That was all it was like amusing. It's like an amusing punchline, but for the page to page, it doesn't give much to the story. And I was expecting him to be angry and mean and for this to be traumatic. And I think that even if he is dumb and lazy, he has been in the educated elite pipeline. He's been going to these college prep school boarding schools. He's been at the liberal Ivy League schools. He's been the dumbest person in the smartest rooms. And so there's still some intellect and ambition that is sitting on the surface of his skull that he is white knuckling. And I think with that much anger and disdain from his family, coupled with falling down this manosphere pipeline, I think he could have really become a doomsday conspiracy prepper, a la Educated, a la Under the Banner of Heaven, a la The Great Alone. And that would have made for a more rigorous story. And it would have actually been traumatic and dramatic. And that would have made the pages, like, be something.
Yeah. Yeah, there were no guns in this story. Maybe that was meant to make it very palatable. But yeah, to your point, I think he would have been a doomsday prepper. Like, he would have done something with his life. Or if he was really that incompetent, he would have, like, fallen more into that incompetence and gotten, like, fat and lazy. And, like, there's a scene in the 1850s where he, like, slaps her and says, like, you gotta come back to us, like, stop being so selfish or something. I don't remember what it is, but yeah, that feels like kind of a weird middle ground where, like, it's not as drastic as this guy. Yeah, it's not him going so far down the rabbit hole that he becomes this, like, crazy person who's out of touch with the world. It's also not him being so incompetent that he's become, like, a blob. He's kind of just, like, in the middle.
He's just coasting. And, like, if that's your point, we didn't need the story for it. Like, make it more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think to that point, all of the characters feel like tropes. We have
Well, they are all tropes. This is all a gimmick.
Yeah. Yeah, the rich mother-in-law, she just, like, drugs herself out of her mind all the time, and she's wasting away, and she has this giant addiction, and that's just, like, in the story, but I don't really understand why. And then the obviously power-hungry father-in-law who's very rich, who, like, only cares about getting more power. There's all these details that are added that I guess are meant to make it feel more realistic or more fleshed out of a story, but I don't understand why they're there. Like, what are we supposed to have gotten from the fact that her mother-in-law does a lot of drugs to cope?
Yeah, I think it's just all supposed to be a reflection of American society, but, like, we're living it. We know.
Yeah.
I know you can, like, create a good narrative arc about this, Caro. Like, why is this not, like, 350 pages of diabolical lies?
Yeah, I mean, that, like we've already said, that is the thing that I'm the most upset about, is that this could have been a story about the systems around us that are failing us, and instead, by making it a crazy person, it becomes about a person who is failing. Like, we don't actually examine the systems. But my last complaint is about the religion elements of the story. So, I grew up religious, Roman Catholic, and I know that the main character is kind of pitched as, like, Mormon-ish, and so I can't speak to Mormonism, but we never see her go to a church function. We never see her go to church. We never see her pray any prayers. She occasionally quotes the Bible, but kind of randomly. And she apologizes to God a lot in her brain, but she doesn't seem to have a theological understanding of the Bible. She points to all of these very specific things that she should and shouldn't do and should and shouldn't be in terms of her relationship to her husband, but they're very cherry-picked from, like, I wouldn't say they represent my understanding of any form of religion. And then, like, yeah, she doesn't really pray. There's no talk of the afterlife. There's no talk of salvation. There's no talk of a soul. It is, like, meant to be a religious book, but when I was reading it, it felt incredibly devoid of true religion and spirituality.
It was just another detail.
Yeah, it felt very much slapped on top. We were being told that she was religious, but we never saw it.
And, like, she definitely used that religion as her, this is why she's better than everyone. But, yeah, you're right. Like, they weren't talking about the eternal kingdom. There was nothing about the Mormon wedding ritual, like.
Yeah. And I'm confused why Rich California Boy is so religious. Like, you know, there are some inconsistencies there too, but even if they had actually both been religious, I would have liked to see them go to church at least once.
Yeah, because that's not even, like, when they get married. That's not what the scene is about. The scene is about having to rub elbows, and certainly that's part of getting married, especially into, like, a high-power family. But, like, talk about the stained glass windows. Jesus.
Mm-hmm. I think if they're this embedded in a church, and if she cares that much about portraying as a good Christian woman, there would have been at least one other Christian woman who she, like, interacted with in person. Like, someone would have dropped off a casserole. Like, don't tell me she's religious, show me she's religious. I feel like since that underpins so many of her supposed motivations, like, the fact that she did not actually seem to have a relationship with God was just, like, felt very blasphemous. Like, this is not a story that criticizes religion or says anything about religion, because religion isn't even in it.
Yeah, I just remember, like, being in 6th grade and learning the show don't tell principle. Like, for whatever reason, that's, like, one day in my public school education that I really remember.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's such good advice. So, yeah, I feel like the author was really good at the interiority. Like, we get really in Natalie's head. We're really feeling her feelings. She's carrying a lot of stress and guilt, and she's an unreliable narrator, and so there are times when she's describing something and then she's feeling something different, and then she's describing something different, and you can tell from that like a third thing is happening. And all of that was really powerful. But I just felt like there's so much more to a story than having good words together. Like, it really has to be about the building of the narrative and the characters and the scene setting, and it built to a twist, but I didn't feel particularly emotionally invested in the twist because I didn't care about any of the characters. And it wasn't like I didn't care about them because they were evil. It's just like they were so inconsistent. Like, I never got a sense of what anybody's motivation was.
Yeah, and that's also why I think it should have been chronological. And I think I kind of, like, sensed that she was psychotic, so I'm like, oh, so it really is just that she's psychotic. For me, the bigger twist was that he was watching football this whole time.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely a twist. Talk about another unrealistic thing. Like, the husband is watching football in the cabin that is built just off of the property that the son, who is probably now in his mid-20s, just, like, lives in. And somehow the son is able to, like, buy all these vegetables for the family to live on. And he's just, like, cool living there. And nobody seemed to question. Like, the whole setup just makes no sense. Like, how is this child there? What does he do for work? How does he pay for all the vegetables?
I think that's the point. It's like he was a product of Caleb's education, and
yeah, but where do they get the vegetables from?
The grocery store.
With what money?
Unemployment.
Yeah, unemployment that they have to tell the government where they live in order to get. You run out of unemployment after a while. So yeah, in conclusion, I couldn't put it down, but that's because I was reading it under the impression that the twist was going to
be good,
resolve it. And the twist was very interesting, but I don't think it salvaged any of it for me. And so I do not think anybody should read Yesteryear. I'm bummed that it is the book of the year. I have read so many books that are actually really well done. Like, if somebody wants a good book, I think they should go read Anna Karenina or Grapes of Wrath, or like, there are so many books that are actually that have like stuck with me for years after I've read them. And I heard this book described that way, the next great American novel, and I was just very disappointed reading it because it was a book. It felt, like a beach read.
Yeah. What's interesting is the book I read before this book was Sociopath, which is...
Oh, yeah, I read that one too.
About someone who is legitimately a sociopath and trying to understand it. And so I don't think Natalie was a sociopath, but it was just interesting going from that book to this book and realizing that Natalie does not care. These people are here for, like, she's literally having kids because it looks good in terms of traditional family values, that kind of thing. Yeah, I am bummed. And if Caro comes out with another book, I will read it. I hope that she has a long enough career that she can look back at this book. This sounds horrible. It's kind of like how I look back at my relationship with my husband and think, oh my God, we were so fucking awkward. Like, I can't even think about our first 4 years together because it was so cringy. I hope she looks back at this book and be like, I could have done better. And I'm glad I was given the opportunity to do so. Because she is. She's going to get another book deal. Mm-hmm. And I hope she takes more time with it. And I hope she doesn't just try to do a spin-off on the Manosphere. Because I want something creative from her. This is not creative.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, in the podcast, she was talking about how she wants to write the story from the kid's point of view. So the book ends with us learning that the teenage daughter in the 1850s goes on to write a tell-all memoir of like how she was raised to think it was the 1850s, and it turns out it wasn't. It feels very educated-esque. And Caro has talked about how she wants to go on and write that, but it may not be the thing she publishes. But yeah, I hope she moves on from this too. And I think this is just going to be a flash in the pan because I don't think this will have the kind of cultural staying power that I was originally led to believe it would, but I'm worried that it will.
It will, because Anne Hathaway bought it, and I do think it will portend well for the screen.
Why did she buy it? It was so bad.
I think it'll make a decent... What we don't see in the book, I think we can see on the screen. It might be better.
I think they're going to have to do a good amount of cleanup for it to become better.
That's the other analogy that I wanted to say about this book. It's like, this book reads as the movie adaptation of something else. It says, and that's probably because all of these stories are co-opted.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good summary of it. It doesn't have the depth that I would want a book to have.
Yeah.
Well, Caro, if you're listening to this, we think you're great. We think your podcast is great. You should still listen to this. We just want you to write a better book. She's not going to.
And what I want to tell all the 20-something-year-olds, don't get an MFA. It's stupid. There are like 3 types of masters that are worthwhile. My master was not worthwhile. An MFA is not worthwhile. Don't get a master's degree. It doesn't help you in any way.
Get an MFA if you come from money and want an MFA. Don't get an MFA if you're hoping it will teach you the kinds of skills that will open doors. Because my understanding is a lot of MFA graduates are now writing YA, which is like not what an MFA is meant to be. Like, these are not literary books. It doesn't mean that the world is not better for having them in it, but it just means that like the MFA does not carry the same sort of scholarly weight that you think it does.
And to learn how to write a book, you just need to write. Like, that's the secret to a lot of things in life. You just have to do it.
A lot. And read. You have to read good books too. You can't just write bad things because you're only reading bad things and think that you will one day get good. Like, if you have not read War and Peace and you want to be a good writer, go read War and Peace like 10 times, I swear. I know you're making it, it's so good. You should try it.
I'll put it on my Goodreads.
You don't have to read the whole thing if you don't want to. It's very long. And like the war parts are kind of annoying. But Tolstoy has the ability to make every single character feel like a real human. And like this takes place in like Russia in the 1800s or something. It's in a world where you would think the characters would feel more alien to you, but you actually read it and you're like, oh my God, I like am this character right now. And I am like, it is, his characterization is like the best I've ever seen.
Okay. Why don't we end this on a book that people should read instead of Yesteryear?
I mean, I think we've talked about a few of them. I wanted the 1850s sections to feel a little bit more like Little House on the Prairie. And that series of books is written for kids, and so it's very like the struggles are kind of stripped away, but it's still a really good series. And the author also went on to write memoirs and books that are meant for adults. And so if you want to get in touch with the 1800s in America, like just read those instead. If you want to read about children who are being raised in abusive situations where they're not learning about things, go read Educated. And I don't have a good book about the influencer. I guess you could read the Sociopath book. Do you recommend that one?
I do. I mean, that's not being an influencer, but it was very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Feels related. I don't know. Do you have any books that people should read instead?
A book about, like, family relations would be The Dutch House. I think that's a really beautiful book about family.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I have any good books that are, like, commentary on society. Because I do tend to go towards books that are people-based.
Mm-hmm.
A better story than this is The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. There is some suspension of disbelief, but there is reliance on the land in a way that this book doesn't even sniff. And then a book about, like, real woman perseverance and survival, Half Broke Horses by Jeanette Walls, and Tracks, a woman's solo trek across 1,700 miles of Australian outback by Robin Davidson.
That sounds good.
And I read The Audition, and it also has a twist that I'm not sure how I feel about, but the author is, like, such a beautiful author. I think it's Kit Katamara, and I want to read more of her books. So if you want, like, a really beautiful read, I would find something of hers.
Nice. Well, I think this was good. I think our listeners now know what they should do instead of reading this book. And if people tell you it's amazing, you should just say that they're entitled to that opinion.
Yeah, it's okay to disagree.
But also, if you think that this is an amazing book, just wait until you read even more amazing books, because there are so many of them and they are so amazing and they will blow your mind.
All right, well,
catch us next week for our regularly scheduled episodes. Bye, y'all.
Bye.